Hi there, this is the ITAM program and Mobility Roles and Responsibilities Part 3. I'll be instructor Tim LaFleur, and let's get started. The topics for this module will include the IT shipment receiving process, the security team role and responsibility, the role the help desk will play in your IT asset management program, vendor manager, and finally we'll conclude with the exercise on a mobility self-assessment. So the project manager, responsible for the success of the assigned project. Key factors that will ultimately lead to the success of a side project are assembling a project team. And not just assembling any project team, but making sure we're assembling the right project team, making sure the right people are involved, the right players, the right individuals that sit around the table and help guide the creation of whatever the project is. Make sure there's a project charter or plans, because we want to be able to know where we're at with the project, if we're hitting our milestones or if we're not, and what we need to do to get back on track. Making sure we've got some semblance of an idea of where we're going. Then we need to gain executive buy-in, making sure that the project plan that we're coming up with for our organization and our IT asset management program, that there's the buy-in from the leadership and the executives. And then management throughout the project of the life of the project. A project doesn't stop when it gets implemented. A project life continues all the way through the maintenance, any updates that need to be made to the project, all the way through the whole life until it gets decommissioned or just scrapped at the end. The project management personnel, they're chosen. Any one of these personnel people is chosen by the project manager and execute all functions as a project team. They're responsible for daily operations of a given project, follow the guidelines of the project management, and include following project plans, budget materials, all the things that go hand in hand with having a project, and obviously they would report to the project manager. Now, mobility can adversely affect any project plan due to relatively unstable nature of the mobile environment. And let me explain that a little bit. In a typical project plan, especially in regarding IT and IT assets, when we're versioning things, when we're updating hardware, when we're doing all that sort of thing, we like to have a plan of when we're going to do it. We know we're going to upgrade this operating system for this subset of users at this time, and we can schedule it and we can roll it out appropriately. But in the mobile world, that's a little bit different, because we don't have that control of when an operating system updates. An operating system will update when the platform, an iOS or an Android or a Windows device says they're going to update. Now, we don't have control over that, and we can't speed it up or slow it down. So if there's a certain set of functionality we're basing our project plan on for a specific operating system, and things update and OS upgrades, chances are we're not going to lose some of that functionality. We might, it's been known to happen, but we're going to most likely gain more capabilities, which should be taken into account when the project plan is being put in place. So mobility can adversely affect it, or at least change the timing of things significantly, which this is all kind of things are out of our control, which, let me tell you, drives project planners just batty. So that is a definitely unique aspect to mobility. The receiver role. The receiver is responsible for receiving the shipments of all assets. Typically, in a normal situation, you have a shipment of hardware or laptops coming into the docks. They'll be the ones that go ahead and make sure that what is on that pallet of computers is actually what's on that pallet, or computers are on the pallet as they say they are. So they'll be the ones that go through the shipment to make sure everything's there. They inspect the packages for any physical damage, and if there is, they reject it. And if there's not, they continue through the process of acceptance. The receiver then ensures the proper parties are notified by the receipt of the asset. Also responsible for the receiving of software via downloads. They'll be the ones that actually install the downloads onto the machine. So security, multifunctional throughout all key process areas, provides support such as audit process support, data and documentation security, as we've talked about, making sure your data is secure throughout the organization, whether it be on a traditional laptop hardware or if it's on your mobile devices, making sure that it's encrypted, and if you're sending it over unsecure channels, things along that line. And the disposal and destruction destruction security, making sure that when an asset's life cycle is up and we're decommissioning it, that we engage with the proper vendors to do the disposal. And mobility acts the same way. There's no difference. The same things need to take place for mobile assets, as well as enforcement of security policies. We need to make sure that if our end users have a lock screen, or our end users are doing the things that they need to do to make sure that the devices are being specific or being safe. Now, with mobility, it does change a little bit because these assets are out of our control a lot longer than the assets are out of our control in a typical working environment. So making sure that they do have some type of security in place, whether it be a lock screen or a kill switch that we can control from a centralized IT department to remotely wipe a device, to any type of biometric security, which iOS just rolled out, and as I mentioned before, Pantech has been doing with their devices for a little bit now. And as we move along, these new security processes will just be getting better. It's definitely been a focus of the platforms themselves, the OEMs or the original equipment manufacturers like Motorola and Samsung. They're all jumping on board the security. So the good news is that security is going to be more robust for mobile devices moving into the future. Now, with that being said, there's always going to be applications that will challenge the security of the devices or the financial output of the financial aspect of this as well. One of the things I always talk about and warn against, to illustrate this point, if we have devices within our organization that are on capped data plans, everyone's on, a lot of people are on capped data plans. So there's an app called Open Garden, and one of the things Open Garden does is allow you to share your remaining data allotment for a month with other people who are open data users. And so I always warn against this or applications such as this, because I don't believe your program manager would want your end users engaging in data sharing with other people who are Open Garden users or other applications that share mobile data. So that's just something to be aware of from a security standpoint, and that becomes an enforcement of security policies, making sure that all the applications that are on the devices, that's not one of them. And they need to know what each application does that might be on a device within an environment, whether it be corporately owned or BYOD. So mobility and security, in addition to applications that could be out there and some of the other things, revolve around making sure that the data and documentation is secure when they're transmitting data, using wireless internet, leveraging a cloud network, and the disposal and destruction of the asset itself. Again, which revolves around the idea that we want to make sure that the username and password are taken off of the mobile asset when it's decommissioned, making sure that when an employee leaves a company that we reclaim that username and password and any data that might be on that device, as well as decommissioning their username and password for any cloud networks they may have been leveraging and making sure we secure that data. So mobility takes into account everything that the normal security processes does, but then just takes a little bit more into account because, again, we're not only managing the mobile asset, we're also managing the person. Usually the initiator of the acquisition process is the stakeholder role. They're going to be the ones who prepare the initial IT asset and based on whatever need that is out there, they're the ones that are going to be the champion for the program and the policies and what we're trying to accomplish within a mobile program. They create the initial business objectives and justification for obtaining it, so they have to know what the program is and the perceived gains for having a asset management program within your organization or a mobile asset management program within your organization, so they can help justify obtaining the IT asset. And they're going to participate in the evaluation and acceptance process. But they don't have the final power of the decision power. So your stakeholder is going to be one that's going to champion for you, but they're not going to be the ones who are going to make the decision. So, we always typically suggest the person that you assign as the stakeholder role be someone who can communicate well, who can be very charismatic and enthusiastic about the program to try to create that excitement for moving into any type of mobile asset management program. Your technical personnel, responsibility for initial asset evaluation, including functional and non-functional requirements. An example of this is, it needs to have X amount of hardware specs to it, but then also it needs to be able to have a micro HDMI port so that I can give presentations on an HD TV. So it's going to lay out all of the functional requirements that a mobile asset might have to achieve the project objectives. Configuration and installing the assets, making sure that the applications on that device are appropriate and making sure that they have the best ones to accomplish the goals of the organization. One of the things I encountered in one of my jobs is implementing mobile assets is we were trying to do mobile spreadsheet manipulation in one of my mobile rollouts, and we were designing a spreadsheet very specifically on a laptop and then translating it very specifically onto a specific mobile device as well as a specific Office suite application. Because in the mobile environment outside of a Windows device that runs pure Microsoft, the applications that mimic a spreadsheet, there's some limitations. There's some things that they all do, but there's some things that they don't do. So we had to be very specific with the installation and configuration of the applications that were being used on the mobile devices to make sure they carried the functionality that we needed them to carry when they went into the mobile world. So the configuration of the device itself and the applications you download for specific purposes become very, very important, and your technical personnel can help you with that. And then monitoring of assets via an automated discovery tool. There's any number of mobile device management companies out there that can help you with this. I would caution with just going with the first one you talk to, because right now the needs of organizations are changing still at a very drastic rate and a very fast rate. The MDM companies are trying to keep up. So some mobile device management companies have decided they're going to take a certain subset of the needs and focus on it, where other companies will take another subset of the needs and focus on that. And they're all going to be a little bit different and have a little bit different strengths. So I would encourage everyone to do their homework when selecting a discovery tool in a mobile device management company to make sure it best fits what you need it to be. And then we'll also ensure the proper parties have been notified of status of the assets. Make sure that we know that that it's ready to go. If anything needs to be fixed on it, and when that fix would have occurred, and things along those lines. Mobility and the technical personnel responsible for initial mobile asset evaluation, making sure that the proper parties are notified of the status of the asset, making sure if we're waiting on a shipment of tablets, making sure that when they come in, we notify the people and get it imaged properly so that we can get it into the hands of the end user faster. They take special considerations during the evaluation process because we need to make sure that we're comparing what the asset can do is what the end user needs it to do. And this is especially important in a BYOD environment. Hopefully with a corporately owned asset, whatever the corporation has decided to purchase we know will fit the ends of the end user and the needs of the end user. But for a BYOD situation, we want to make sure that the people who are bringing these devices into our environment understand that they need to have a certain capability, and that's where your technical personnel can come in and make sure that as a BYOD asset enters into the environment, that it's got a specific set of specifications that will help the end user. And this just compare the strengths and weaknesses of the mobile asset against what we need from an organizational standpoint to realize the productivity gains or whatever the goals are of the program. And we need to make sure we have an ever-present focus on how mobile carriers are affecting the overall program. If a mobile carrier is slow to roll out operating system updates, we might need to take that into consideration because we might need a patch or a bug fix to come out, and if a carrier is slow to get it out, that could adversely affect the program, as well as just raising costs in the way the data plans will change. All those things we need to make sure we're being aware of the ISP and how they're going to affect the program. Your vendor manager is going to monitor the vendors to determine if the vendor is giving us what we need. If the vendor can't offer the proper assets for whatever our mobile approach is, we might need to look at a new vendor. Communication, analyzing vendors' performance. There's vendor scorecards out there. There's ways of validating how well a vendor is doing, and we need to make sure that we're communicating this back to our management. as well as the maintenance of these scorecards. You don't do a scorecard on a vendor once and be done with it. You repeat the process. You do it once. You identify where they are, what they're doing well, or what they could be doing better in, and then you reevaluate them to see where they're at, how far they've come. It's often said you never know the true value of a vendor until we're in a crisis situation, and whatever the crisis might be. So you want to be able to manage and have an idea of how the vendor crisis management situation would work. An easy example of that is if an employee is on the road and they break or lose their mobile device, how quickly does the vendor get a new one out to them? Because that essentially is a crisis situation for that employee, for their job productivity. So we want to know how quickly they can get a device re-imaged and sent out to them. And this vendor manager obviously communicates with the program manager on how well things are going with the vendor. So mobility in the vendor manager, I briefly talked about re-imaging a device and getting it out to an employee. But they're also responsible for monitoring the hardware, the applications, the carriers, all of that. So a vendor doesn't necessarily isn't just one vendor. You're going to have multiple vendors that need to be managed. They're also responsible for the communication and analyzing the mobile vendor performance, again through maybe a scorecard or other type of rubric or any type of other metric. And the maintenance, we talked about this as well. So not only are we going to do the initial assessment, we're going to keep doing an assessment and making sure that they're still scoring high. And then this role obviously communicates back to the program manager. Mobility in the vendor manager. Items to be recorded are reliability of network throughout the working area. If your vendor is an ISP or a carrier, we want to make sure that we have the best carrier and the best signal and the best network throughout where our employees are. And this is something that's, again, unique to mobile. You don't really have this ISP and network conversation when you're dealing with a laptop or a specific piece of software to go on a piece of hardware. This is something that's pretty much unique to the mobile environment. We want to make sure we rate of upgrading services in a year. Are we going to, when a device needs to upgrade, are we going to be able to get the upgraded device and the upgraded service? And so that goes back to your contracts and your acquisition and making sure that you're setting your organization up to be able to capitalize on mobility and all the varying aspects thereof. We want to make sure we're recording and have an idea of the strengths of the hardware asset. If the vendor we're working with isn't offering us the best hardware to use, we may need to look for a new vendor. And that's a conversation that not only is had by organizations around mobility, but also that consumers have. You look at a specific carrier and you look at the line of devices they have. If they don't have the hardware device that we want, we might move on to a new carrier. So making sure that our vendor, from an organizational standpoint, has the strength of hardware assets that we need them to have. And then how stable are our OS releases? When we're looking at using an Android device or an iOS device or Windows or what have you, how stable are those OS releases? If we're getting ourselves involved with a platform that when they update an OS isn't stable and it causes the devices to crash, then we may need to rethink the platform we're working on. Now, hopefully that type of study has been done already before we do decide on a mobile platform or an operating system. But things change. Things always change throughout the course in the life of a contract, so it's something that we need to constantly be thinking about. Vendor management personnel, they provide support with the performance analysis of the scorecard. Any corrective action management if the vendor is doing things that are outside the scope of what we want them to do, or if they're acting unethically, or if they're just not giving us the best price, or whatever the case may be, the personnel is going to be involved in the corrective action management. They're going to be involved in the communication between the program manager or the vendor manager and that particular vendor. So they're going to act as a liaison of sorts. They're going to maintain the scorecard, so we always have an idea of how well our vendors are performing for us. And they're going to communicate with the vendor manager on how all of this is going, which will then in turn communicate back to the program manager. Mobility in the vendor management personnel, supporting vendor management processes with matters pertaining to mobile assets. They're going to do the vendor manager. They're going to provide the vendor manager the same support with performance analysis of whether it's the operating system for that mobile device, the network that they happen to be on, the actual manufacturer of the device, or any peripherals that are involved. So their job gets to be rather large when they start analyzing all the varying components that are involved with mobility, just not the device itself, but all the other things that go with it. They're going to aid in the corrective action management. So again, if there's anything going on that needs corrective action in the mobile world, whether it be with a carrier or a piece of hardware or the operating system, they're going to participate in that as well. And then again, the communication scorecards and the maintenance for the mobile assets, they're going to have a stake in that as well. So at this point, I would like you to download the exercise guide from the course materials tab of the course page. Pause the video, take that, and when you return, we will spend some time talking about key areas and highlights that we tend to see throughout people doing this self-assessment for mobility. So go ahead and complete the exercise. Thank you for listening to this module, and we'll see you in the next one.